Hello, and welcome back to A Mental Break. I'm your host, Taylor Simpson, and on today's episode, I have one of my longtime pals. She's from Saskatchewan, used to live in Toronto. We used to hang out all the time back in the day. We're still pals, and she was kind enough and a lovely enough soul to come on the show and speak about her experiences with her mental health. I have Kat.
Hi,
What's going on, Kat?
I'm good. And how are you?
I'm good. Thank you so much for being on the show. I really appreciate it.
No, thank you. I'm really excited to talk about my struggles, the real struggles today.
The real reels.
Yes.
Well, I'm happy to have you on, and I'm so proud of you, and so I don't know, just glad that you were strong enough and reached out to me and was like, "Hey, I'll be on the show."
Well, my favorite topic is me, so I'll talk about me all day.
Hey, everybody's favorite topic should be themselves, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, I usually always start off each podcast with asking the guest how they're feeling today during the recording, and do they feel safe? Do they feel okay to speak about the things that we're going to get into? Just making sure that they consent to everything that's going to go down in the podcast to make sure they're comfortable and everything. So, are you okay with moving forward with today's subject matter?
Absolutely. I consent completely. I could not feel any more safe. Like, especially just like being with Taylor and hanging out. I'm like really excited and I just feel good.
Cool.
Yeah.
Just it's just a thing that I've implemented in these podcasts because you never know, right? Like, they might say that they're okay to come on, and then we get recording and stuff, and I don't blame them if something's wrong that day. It's tough to talk about this stuff, So I
Okay.
just always want to make sure.
For real, and I appreciate that.
Awesome. Well, I'm glad you're feeling comfortable. That's a good sign. So let's jump into it, shall we?
All right.
So the first question I always ask my guests is just tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell the listeners who Kat Dent is.
All right. Well, I am I don't know, how old am I now? I'm a 28-year-old woman. I came here to talk today about my struggles with ADHD, getting diagnosed, and like previously before that, just like working through the medical institutions and like being ignored and being figured out at the same time. I currently run my own business. I'm a copywriter, which if people have watched Mad Men, it's basically, I believe her name is Pam or Peggy, I'm sorry. But she basically, what she does is exactly what I do. So I'm a marketer that writes long form, like blog content to sell. And yeah, I'm kind of a geek. Like I like video games and watching anime, and I really like fashion. And I have like a shit ton of hobbies that I pick up and forget about and I remember again. It's kind of the struggle there.
And she used to be a server as well,
Mm-hmm.
It seems to be a theme. I keep getting a bunch of servers on this podcast.
Yeah, it's a good quick way to make money, especially when you're not college educated like myself. So.
And so tell the listeners a cool story about us. We've got a few of them, but what comes to mind?
Well, the Lips of Kirk thing always comes to mind.
Oh, I love that story.
Yeah, like
tell the story from your perspective.
Okay, so Taylor, do you want to go by TJ or Taylor? I'm so used to calling you TJ. So
doesn't matter either way.
Okay, so TJ and our mutual friend Kirk and I, we would go on.
Shout out to Kirk.
Shout out to Kirk. We'd go on all these misadventures. One of them, which I was also going to bring up, was we met this guy at Square One, which is like a big mall in Mississauga, who did like balloon animals, but we asked them to make us swords, and we just started sword fighting. And Square One was
the epic Square One sword battle of 2015.
I think it was 2012, 2011.
Oh God. Okay.
Yeah, I know. It's like 10 years ago. Wow. But yeah, so we would go on these adventures, and we were at Palladium one day, and they had this like recording booth set up where you could like record karaoke tracks. and Lips of an Angel by, who's it by?
Hinder.
Hinder, yeah. That was like a big song at the time.
Yep.
And I don't know, like Taylor was like really enthusiastic about going in the booth and singing, and like Kirk and I were just like, whatever, we'll indulge him. And so
indulge the choir boy.
Yeah, and so to get us hyped up, TJ started singing an alternative version of Lips of an Angel called Lips.
You can say that.
Yeah, called Lips of Kirk, and because it's really good to hear your voice saying my name. It sounds like Kirk coming from the lips of Kirk. And
yeah, pretty much just anytime he says like babe or girl, I just replace it with Kirk.
Mm-hmm. But like it became more like erratic. Like I remember the person that you were cheating on and the person that you wanted, the person that you were with and the person you wanted to be with were both Kirk in the song. So everybody was Kirk.
Everyone was Kirk.
So at the end, you can hear like me saying at the end of the recording, "Are you cheating on Kirk with Kirk?"
Oh, I forgot about that. That's so. It was in the recording too.
Yeah, like right before it cuts off.
Right at the end. Yeah, it's like you're cheating on Kirk with Kirk.
Yeah, and Kirk is just there like smiling.
Man, I remember that machine burned it onto a CD. Do you remember that?
Yes, and I
don't know what happened to that CD.
I know I still have like the MP3 version of it on my old laptop. I have to get it. You know, it'd be cool.
Oh my god, please get it.
What if we like do like a recording of it, or like you, and then I come in at the end asking you if you're cheating on Kirk with Kirk.
That'd be amazing. Listeners, please remind us about this later.
That'd be so epic.
This has to happen.
Mm-hmm.
I just wanted to tell a lighthearted story before we get into the nitty gritty of it all. You know, just to get the listeners into a nice groove. You know.
Oh yeah, like and
just to give them a backstory of who we are together as a friendship and who you are as a person, kind of thing. Just so people have a better understanding of that. You know.
Oh, thank you. Like TJ and I, we go like way back. Like I knew of TJ like way back, like probably like when I was in grade 10, so TJ's a year younger than me. So I would see him in the halls with his backpack full of like pins from like 80s bands. And I was like, oh my god. And the first time I ever spoke to him was like, oh man, you like Guns N' Roses too, or something like that.
There you go. We go way back.
Yeah. And then I married
longer than I care to remember.
Right? Forever ago.
Okay, well, let's jump into the next question.
Mm-hmm.
So I know you already touched upon ADHD, so that's good because that leads me to the next question I have to ask for you.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, what mental health struggles or illnesses do you deal with? Have you been formally diagnosed by a doctor or a professional or psychiatrist, whoever, or do you just know what you're feeling is? You just have a very strong inclination that is what you're dealing with. Because this has been a reoccurring theme on the pod where I keep saying these things and people are like, well, you don't have to be diagnosed. I'm like, yeah, that's not what I'm saying. It's valid either way, like whether you're diagnosed or not. I'm not saying you have to be diagnosed to say that you have it. It's if you have it, you have it. That's why I always ask. The second part of this question is, do you know what you have? It just hasn't been formally diagnosed yet. So just touch a little bit upon that.
Right, like I'll even say too, like all the things that I'm going to talk about, I always knew I had them. It's just I either didn't know it had a name, or I wasn't told by a doctor that I had these things. And oftentimes what happens is, like, especially with me, is that people will misdiagnose you because if like for ADHD, right, with women who are over the age of like adolescence, like I think it's like 11, it's so much more difficult to get diagnosed. So even if I knew I had ADHD my whole life, a doctor is less likely to validate that. But that doesn't mean that you don't have it. It means that, you know, they try to go for the most likely thing, like depression or anxiety, which is so common nowadays that like I think doctors just it's like the default.
Right.
So with me, I was actually diagnosed with multiple other disorders before ADHD was the thing that was concrete.
Got it.
Even when I was a kid, I was diagnosed with something called conduct disorder, which is it's difficult to explain, but it's basically like you're kind of like an unruly child who doesn't follow rules and may do like a criminal activity, like they might steal or something. I was diagnosed with that at a very young age because like I had a very unstable upbringing, a lot of abuse in my family. So I've been to child psychologists, and like I was even taking benzos when I was in middle school for anxiety because my anxiety was just so bad. Like I would have anxiety attacks because I was afraid of having anxiety attacks.
Wow.
Yeah, like, and I could like not eat because I was afraid I would choke and I'd have an anxiety attack. Like my anxiety
Oh my goodness.
was awful. Yeah.
So it's like a vicious cycle.
Yeah. And like the only way I was able to not be so severe was through medication and having like friends outside of my abuse bubble, which was my home. Because like if you're constantly in a place of like stress, you kind of just kind of go like, I don't want to say insane because I don't want to sound like I hate using that word, but I was personally going insane.
Yeah, and that's fine. That's like I said, it's valid to what your experience is, and that if that's what you feel like was happening to you, that is what it is, right?
Well, thank you. I just like I'm worried because like I know that a lot of people get called crazy or insane when like they're not. They're just like experiencing things in their life that are difficult to comprehend or understand, and so they act in ways that aren't seen as
right. The term gets thrown around a lot, unfortunately.
Yeah.
In a negative context.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, I was diagnosed with depression. I got diagnosed with insomnia actually in high school. And then I eventually, through like sleeping tests, I got diagnosed with 5 different sleeping disorders. So I never sleep.
Wow. So when did this all? Was it all diagnosed at once, Kat, or was this diagnosed throughout the years as they came in your life?
I think conduct disorder was diagnosed when I was like younger, like 6, 7.
So yeah, so you've been dealing with this since a very young age, then.
Yeah, and then like anxiety and depression was in grade 5. Insomnia was in high school, and then in between those times, I had like suicidal thoughts, suicidal ideation, and then eventually I did try to commit suicide multiple times. But then ADHD, I got diagnosed pretty recently, like the last 2 months.
Really?
Yeah. So this is
interesting. So it's
recent.
still pretty fresh then.
Mm-hmm.
Well, not for you, but
yeah. But with ADHD, like even I think it's more of like a retroactive thing. Like now that I'm diagnosed with ADHD and I can look back and see my behaviors, I'm like, oh, that makes so much sense. Because I never thought I would have ADHD because I always did well in school. Like I graduated with honors. I always got my homework done, even if it was last minute. And then I ended up building a business. So I thought, well, like if I can't focus, then how am I able to do all these things?
Right.
But then I realized that I was just able to adjust around the issues that I had that I didn't even really know were issues. I thought it was just like laziness, or I was incompetent, or there was something quote unquote wrong with me. Like
right.
Society's telling me I'm supposed to be this way, so I act that way.
Right.
Even though it's difficult.
Yeah, and you could have also just pinned it on your anxiety and depression, right?
Yeah. I've known I've had that since elementary school.
Yeah, because ADHD looks a bit different than depression, anxiety. They act sort of similar, but there are very big differences between the two.
Yeah.
And as somebody going through that and not knowing until 2 months ago that that's what it is, it's easy for you back then to just chalk it up to, oh, well, I'm just depressed, so this is why I can't focus properly, or this is why I can dodge around these things and only hyperfixate on certain things, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like even when I would speak to my friends, I would say like, why can't I focus on things that I don't like, but I can only focus on things that I do like. And then they're like, well, that's normal, right?
Right, right,
But it's like, no, but I can't even will myself to get through like cooking or cleaning or homework.
right,
Like the only way I was able to do it is if my anxiety got to the point where I was so worried about the deadline that I'd rather eat the frog and like do that work right away than stay up at night thinking about it,
right, right.
which is a symptom of ADHD. I didn't
Wow,
even
so
know.
it's didn't even know, but it was always there.
Yes.
But then that must have been like an interesting experience 2 months ago, getting that diagnosis and then almost like shedding a light for you on what you've been dealing with throughout the years. Did that help at all? Like give you some clarity as to what was happening with you?
Yeah, like I like the fact that I knew that I had ADHD. Some people, like some psychiatrists, will say it's kind of like a learning disability.
Mm-hmm.
But I kind of like to think of it as it's a learning disability in the society that we live in.
Right.
Like I don't think ADHD would have been as much of an issue in like if I was a farmer or if I had like a more simpler life. Like with ADHD, like there's so many distractions.
Yeah, especially in today's world, like you said.
Yeah. So like no matter what I'm doing, there's always something more interesting to do.
Right, right.
But if I'm a farmer, I literally can only farm or I don't eat. So
Yeah, you only give yourself the two options.
yeah, exactly. So I like the fact that I know that I have it, not because it quote unquote validates me in the medical system, but because it says to me that I'm not broken or there's something wrong with me. It's just that I have something going on with my brain that makes me different,
Right.
and that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. So something we haven't really touched upon on the podcast fully in depth yet. Um, in the last episode with Nicole, my friend Nicole that came on, she spoke briefly about her situation with antidepressants and stuff like that to deal with her depression or whatever.
Mhm.
But yeah, nobody else on the pod so far has really gone in depth about the whole medication side of things. So, Kat, with all the stuff that you've dealt with so far and have been formally diagnosed with, have you been put on medication to deal with any of these things at all? And if so, what has that experience been like for you?
Yeah, I've been on multiple kinds of medication. Like I said, I was on benzos, which is like a really, it's like a, I'm trying to think of the word. It's just like a really intense, like anti-anxiety medication.
Okay.
And it was only given to me at my age because my anxiety was to the point of like I could not function.
Right.
I couldn't even go to school.
Wow.
Yeah, like I had been on that. I was on antidepressants. I don't remember the antidepressants I was on.
Right.
But currently I am taking Vyvanse for ADHD.
Okay.
I was taking another one before. It's not Ritalin and it's not Adderall. It's the other one, but I can't think of it.
Right, because the first one that jumps out to me is the Adderall because it's most talked about in the ADHD world.
Yeah. But the Vyvanse, I did some research and I thought that Vyvanse would work best for me because it's a slow acting medication. So it'll be in my system for 12 to 14 hours. And then I can, because it's like a stimulant, I won't be able to sleep. Well, I can't personally sleep if I take Vyvanse.
Right.
I can only sleep after it's out of my system. But I can talk about how the ADHD medication has affected me and how you kind of know if you have ADHD when you take this medication, because it's actually a really good way to tell.
Yeah, I was just talking about that with somebody else recently. I can't remember who was saying that, but yeah, someone was telling me that like once you're on the medication, it kind of becomes very clear whether or not you have it or not, right?
Yeah,
And I was
absolutely.
very interested about that. I was like, I mean, I guess that would be a good way to tell if it actually works the way it should work. That probably means you have it.
Yeah. Like you know, I'm sure this goes without saying, but like this is my own personal experience, so I'm not a psychiatrist, right?
Yep.
But I had first heard about Adderall probably I saw a documentary, and it was a documentary about college students who took Adderall because they wanted to study for a long length of time.
Right.
And when I was watching that, I saw Adderall as like I wouldn't say like a smart drug, but I thought it was something like that just gave you such intense focus that you could accomplish anything. And
Yeah.
I always had issues with focus. So I was like, well, maybe that would actually be it. But I didn't want to abuse medication.
Of course.
Yeah. Cause like we can talk about this later, but like I've gone through a history of drug abuse.
Mm-hmm.
And I was worried because Adderall is a stimulant that
Yep.
I would just be addicted immediately, because it's like cocaine. It's like meth.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Like,
I've heard horror stories of people getting addicted to Adderall and stuff like that. It's such a negatively stigmatized drug, I guess is the way I describe it.
yeah, absolutely. Like it's a class 2 drug for a reason. It's so difficult to get because it can actually change your brain chemistry.
Right.
But I kind of looked at it as like, okay, maybe I should tell my doctor that I'm having focus issues, because I didn't think I had ADHD at the time.
Right.
So, but he thought that I had depression, which I already knew I had, but he put me on depression meds instead.
Okay.
But anyway, long story short, when I spoke to my psychotherapist, not my psychiatrist, so this is somebody different.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I have like these soldiers behind me, all these doctors.
The whole team.
The whole team's here, yeah.
The whole squad.
Exactly. So
that's good though. It's good that you have that, because a lot of people don't know how to get that, or are scared to assemble that team or whatever.
Actually, put a pin in that, because that'd be a great thing.
We'll come back to that. We'll come back to that.
So when I was diagnosed with ADHD, I was put on something called Coursera, which actually has like meth literally in like the scientific term for it, because it is actually like I'm microdosing meth.
Whoa. I had no idea.
It's that intense. So Ritalin is the same thing. I noticed like immediately my life changed. Like it was like flicking on a light switch, where like, I had to struggle to stay focused. I didn't have to struggle as much. And that's like the point that I want to make, is that if you have a little bit of issues focusing, and you take like Adderall and you can focus on one thing and not get distracted at all, you probably don't have ADHD. That doesn't mean you don't, but you probably don't. Because with ADHD, if I take medication, I still have to make an active, like I have to actively think about staying focused. Otherwise, I'll focus on something else and then I won't be able to get distracted.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm. So it's like a catch-22 thing.
Right. Like, so the medication itself just, does it make it just a little bit easier to focus? But like again, like you said, you have to make that active choice still. So it's almost like training wheels on a bike.
Yes. Yeah.
Is that a good analogy?
Yeah, absolutely. Because like, whereas if I just like, if I biked without training wheels, without knowing how to bike,
you'd fall over.
I kept falling over basically with ADHD, because my phone, my computer, this or that.
Right. You'd be like, oh, look, a squirrel, and then
yeah, like it's a stereotype for a reason. Like I would, if I didn't want to work on something, I would just get distracted constantly.
Right.
But with the medication, like I said, I was able to focus. But if I didn't watch myself, I'd accidentally focus on something else, and then an hour goes by, and I don't realize that I'm doing
That you're
work.
even doing it.
Yeah.
Wow. It's interesting because a lot of people, I feel like ADHD, and Kat, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like ADHD is a very misunderstood diagnosis
Oh, absolutely.
or mental illness. Like it's thrown around. It was thrown around a lot in the 90s and 2000s. I remember that like every doctor ever was like, "Oh, you got ADD.
Mhm.
You got ADD." And like now, I don't even think they use the term ADD anymore, right? It's now just ADHD. Is that correct?
ADD and ADHD. I can't speak from like a medical point of view.
Standpoint, obviously, yeah.
Yeah, but ADHD just is that extra like hyperactive.
Right.
But it doesn't mean that it shows in your body. Like you can be like, especially with girls, because girls are socialized to be less confident when they speak and less like readily able to like just talk loudly.
Right.
Because we're discouraged more than boys are when they're socialized.
Absolutely.
So, but my hyperactive tendencies, I was always like a very loud person, as you know.
Mm-hmm.
It came out.
That's why we're friends.
Yeah. It came out in class all the time. Like I would not be able to shut up.
Yeah, you were the class clown.
I was. If you're the class clown, you probably have ADHD.
You probably have ADHD.
Because like your mind just goes a mile a minute. But like most people who have ADHD who are quiet, they'll like shake their leg or they'll play with their hair. They'll like bite their zipper or like suck on their sleeve is another thing I've seen.
Interesting. I wonder if going back to the leg thing, I wonder if restless leg syndrome is kind of attached to ADHD in a way.
Yeah, like I have. That's one of the sleep disorders I'm diagnosed with is restless leg.
Oh wow, so you're actually diagnosed with restless leg syndrome as well.
Yeah, I was put in a machine like they watch you sleep. It's kind of
Oh, like a sleep clinic?
yeah, because my sleeping like my disorder was getting so bad because like I would wake up after a full night of sleep and I'd feel like I didn't sleep at all.
Wow.
And I'd have like I still have this. I lucid dream almost every night.
So for listeners that don't quite understand what that is, try to tap into that a bit just so they have a better understanding.
Oh, for sure. So like lucid dreaming is when you're able to take control of your dream. So you're aware that you're dreaming and you're able to move and talk and like do things like you can tell yourself to do those things. And then
It's kind of like an outer body experience almost, isn't it?
Yeah, like a lot of ancient cultures thought it was like astral projecting.
Yeah, for sure.
Like you're actually going to a different plane of existence.
Mm-hmm. The spiritual dimension or whatever you want to call it, right?
Yeah.
Crazy.
I know, like things are something.
But then Kat's probably going, I didn't ask for this. I just want to sleep.
I know. That's the thing is like I am tired like all the time. Like I just want to friggin' sleep, please.
Yeah, and you touched upon insomnia too, right? Do you suffer from insomnia as well, or?
Yeah, like
So what's that like for you?
most days it's not so bad. But there have been, and this actually happened recently, like 3 months ago, where I was up for 3 nights. I didn't sleep at all.
Wow.
And when you're awake for that long, you actually
start to hallucinate.
Yes, you start to.
Because I've also been up for that long, and it was like I was on drugs again.
Yeah, it's insane, and you start like, I would be talking to my husband, and I could hear the things coming out of my mouth.
Shout out to Mike.
Shout out to Mike. Yeah. I could hear the things coming out of my mouth, but my brain wasn't understanding what I was saying.
Whoa.
It was like I just kept talking.
There was like a disconnect.
Yeah, like a disassociation between like body and mind.
Oesh,
Yeah.
that's some messed up stuff. I don't know about you, but like when I was up for 72 hours, maybe even 74 hours. And I got back to my this is in Peterborough. I got back to my grandparents' house like the third day because I was at a sleepover at my friend's house, right? And we stayed up like all weekend. And I remember I walked back to my grandpa's house from my friend's house. and I got home and I sat down in my grandpa's room where the TV is, and I literally started seeing dots,
Uh,
like blobs in my vision. Like they're like blue and yellow and different colors, and they're just like, 'cause my grandpa has this weird wallpaper in his room, right? And like
uh,
so like the wallpaper was like coming to life, and I was like, I swear, did someone spike my iced tea? Like what the hell's happening to me right now? It was very strange, and I just passed out, and I slept for like 18 hours.
holy. Yeah, that's the demons trying to possess you. Don't let them.
Yeah, that was that was those sleep demons trying to get me.
Yeah, actually, have you ever experienced sleep paralysis? Because I've experienced that too.
So Lena, my roommate, and I were just talking about this a few days ago.
Mhm.
How she used to experience it when she was younger. Not so much anymore, but she had it happen to her a few times. And I can't remember a time where that's ever happened to me, unfortunately, or fortunately,
Unfortunately.
because I heard it's a scary experience. I have had some like astral projection-y moments.
Mhm.
That's why I wanted to talk about the whole insomnia thing, because I was like, that's really cool, because I feel like I experienced that a couple of times where I feel like I was in the middle of a dream, but I was aware that I was dreaming.
Mhm.
And it was almost like I was in my room, but I was still. It was like I was like looking down at myself sleeping. It was so strange, and I was like, "Whoa, what the hell?" And I was like walking around my house doing like normal tasks that I would normally do, but I was asleep the whole time, and I was like, "This is bizarre." And then I woke up in real life, and I was like, "What the?" And it felt like I'd done all those things. Like it was so strange. I went downstairs, and I was like, the dishes weren't done, and I was like, "I did the dishes. What the hell?"
You, some people, when they lucid dream, they like fly or they like punch a guy they hate. You like do the dishes.
Yeah, no, my brain just like, we gotta do dishes. Yeah, I had the shitty end of the stick when it comes to astral projection. But in terms of sleep paralysis, no, that's never. Fortunately, it's never happened to me. But has that happened to you, Cap?
Yes, it has happened to me a lot of times. And
And have you had the? Sorry, have you had the old hag? Because I've heard that's a very popular thing with sleep paralysis.
no, but I had something that was kind of like it. Like I have two uh sleep paralysis dreams like almost every time.
Okay.
So one of them I actually think is like less terrifying, but so I'll wake up, I can't move, but I'll have like audio hallucinations, like outside of like somewhere I can't see. I can hear somebody being like murdered.
Oh my god.
It's like somebody screaming. It's
Wow.
it's horrifying,
That's
right?
scary. Because then you can't move either, so you can't really look at it.
No, and then depending on where I'm sleeping, like the position of where I'm sleeping, if I'm looking at a wall, it's even worse because I wouldn't know, like, because I'm not really sure if it's like a dream or not at this point. I don't know if, like, oh, if they sneak up on me, but I can't move.
Right, because there's no like spatial awareness.
Yeah, but if I'm like if I'm face up or if I'm looking towards the noise, I feel more comfortable because I'm like, oh, well, even though I can't move, at least I know if my demise is coming.
I'll be able to see it.
Yeah, but the one that always fucks with my head and like I always feel weird afterwards is I can see a man. He always looks the same, sitting at the end of my bed and just looking at me. And this man I've never seen in my life. Like he's not somebody that I've met.
I was gonna say it's not Mike.
No.
Your husband.
No. It's no, I've had this lucid dream since high school.
Oh, so even before all this, yeah.
Yeah. So like I've looked this up and people are saying it's like your guardian angel or it's like
or your guardian demon.
Or I don't know. It's like but yeah, I wish he'd leave me alone because
What do they call those things from Death Note? Shinigami.
Oh, Shinigami, yeah, maybe.
Maybe it's the Shinigami.
Maybe he's telling me I'm gonna die soon. Oh my god.
Or he's giving you a book. Who knows?
Yeah.
You'll be the next Light Yagami.
Oh man, I'm not that savvy. I get
the next Kira.
Yeah.
Sorry, this is the anime section of this podcast.
You like Death Note, guys?
Well, let's get back on track.
Yeah.
So the next question I have for you, I mean, we pretty much covered a lot of that in that question,
Yeah.
but in case we missed anything,
Mhm.
what has your experience been like, or your perspective of dealing with your mental health?
Yeah, if there's a yeah, I think like if there's anything I haven't said, it's just been like more of like a roller coaster where I feel like physical and mental illness, like just throughout my life, I always feel like I was not validated for the feelings that I had. Like, and this is like a physical example. Like, I was dying from kidney disease for 5 years.
Right.
Nobody would test me. Everybody thought I was full of shit.
Ugh, yeah.
When they finally tested me because they thought I had kidney stones, they realized that my kidney was only working at 10%. And if they didn't operate on me immediately, I was going to die.
Holy shit.
Yeah. And like, that is literally my perspective for mental health as well. It's like, it's at the final hour when I feel like I can't take it anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And they're finally like, oh, okay, well, this is what it is. And it's like, well, great. There's a sense of relief, but it's also like, I feel like I wasn't taken care of.
Did you find that you ever had, because I know like personally for me, when I was going through well, I'm still going through mine, but like uh, going through the mental health struggles and then being diagnosed with, the stuff that I have, I went through a period of identity crisis
Mm-hmm.
of, not wanting to be me because I hated the me that I was, or even just disassociating myself entirely, because that's when I got into my drug phase and just stopped existing. I just pulled myself out of reality for a while because I didn't want to live in it.
Yeah.
So my question to you, in your experience, to stay on point of the question, is did that ever happen to you? Like when you were 5, you said you were diagnosed with the conduct
Mm-hmm.
disorder, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then followed up with the anxiety and depression at again an early age, and then everything else that happened throughout your life since until now. Has there ever been a moment in your life during your experience where you just didn't want to be you, or you suffered some sort of identity crisis at all?
Yeah. I think up until very recently, I've had this like constant feeling of being like dirty or gross or like I didn't belong. And it made me mask my true self. I learned that a lot of people who have ADHD, out of fear of rejection, because they're usually rejected, um, they kind of create multiple versions of themselves.
Right.
And, like I know that I did that because if somebody rejected a person that wasn't me, it didn't matter because that person wasn't me.
Right.
So absolutely, like I think it was only until like very recently that I said, okay, well, now that I know what I am, like with the ADHD, I feel like I'm more comfortable being myself, but it took a long time. And some people never get to that point.
It's very true.
Yeah. Because there's just that fear of being rejected for who you are.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And like even
in like an average person, and then you got to multiply that by 1,000, you get diagnosed with these mental health illnesses.
Yeah, exactly. Like you don't want to get too close to somebody because they're gonna think that you're weird. Like this is a thought of me that I had. Or like when you do get close to somebody and they don't want to hang out with you anymore, it's always like, oh, like what could I have done differently? And then you just keep adjusting and becoming like a people pleaser, and you kind of start not recognizing yourself. And then the identity crisis happens, and then I did something very similar to you. I started misusing drugs, drinking heavily because I just couldn't take it. I couldn't take that people just, especially because my parents did not show me love growing up, I couldn't take the fact that nobody would love me for me.
Right.
But I wasn't giving myself enough credit. Like, I know now at the end of it, and now that I feel like mentally better than I did back then, I know that, you know, sometimes people just don't connect. But when you're in that mindset, like when you're depressed, when you're feeling very anxious, your mind starts playing like these tricks on you. Like it actively works against you to think that you're bad when you're not.
Yeah.
Or like all of your bad, or not really bad, but like maybe
like you're less than.
Yeah, like if maybe you were a little selfish one time, right? But your head kind of thinks like, oh, I'm always selfish. This is why people hate me.
Mm-hmm.
It's like this disasterizing of a situation.
Yes. Catastrophizing is I think it's the term that Nicole and I were talking about in our last podcast.
Yeah, exactly.
Like making a thing that's not really that bad the worst thing in the world because your depression makes it feel that way.
Yeah, exactly. But like, and you know, when I'm going through depression, and if like anybody who's listening is going through depression, you can't, or it feels like you can't tell yourself that these things aren't true because in your brain they're so real.
Yeah.
But then when you get to the other side, you're able to realize that those thoughts, those negative feelings that you had about yourself, they're not real. They were just something that your brain made up.
Yeah.
So they are real because your brain said them, but I mean, it's not reality. It's not what actually is happening. It's your depression making it so.
Yeah, exactly. It's not actually what's unfolding in front of you. It's just what your brain is making you think is happening in front of you.
Exactly. And like, that's why I think it's so hard to reach out.
Yeah, it's incredibly hard to reach out
Mm-hmm.
because you don't even know it's real at that point.
Yeah. And it's like, I guess I'm kind of going a little off topic here, but it's just like when I hear of my friends, they went through something like on their own. And then I feel guilty for not realizing it. But then when I think of back when I had depression, I didn't want to reach out at all.
Right.
Because I felt like I was bothering somebody.
Yeah.
It's just it's crazy to me how different you can think about a situation because of depression.
Absolutely.
Yeah, like totally changes. But yeah, like I definitely I go through identity crises like consistently, but I feel like now I can honestly say that I'm starting to get at the other side of it because I think through not just age, but then also me being able to love myself more.
Yeah.
I'm able to be more of me and not just masks or people that I want to be so that I'm liked.
Yeah, you have like a better understanding, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like now that you've been formally diagnosed and stuff, and I mean, again, like you said, time is a big thing when it comes to people with mental health illnesses, especially, well, from my perspective at least, and I'm sure from you as well, and previous podcast guests that have come on and talked about it. It's like the more you live with it, the more you start to understand it, and if you go get help, the professionals or whoever you go to will explain it to you in a better way that makes more sense to you. And if you continuously get help and you actively push through it and do exercises that makes it a bit easier, you know, there's this whole like misnomer about mental health. It's just like, oh, you're just sad. It's like, no, like this is an illness. Like I'm mentally ill, and like there's a chemical imbalance in my brain that could take medication to fix, but there really isn't a cure. Because I feel like the general population still doesn't really understand that.
Yeah.
And like it doesn't really ever go away. Like once you're depressed, and like that is something you'll have to deal with for probably the rest of your life.
Yeah.
It'll get easier. Like it won't be as bad as when you first get diagnosed or when you first start experiencing the symptoms of depression. Because I know, at least for me, I know when I got diagnosed, I was feeling it before I got diagnosed, obviously, and then I got help, and then that was when I got my diagnosis. But those first few years of dealing with it were horrible, and I'm sure you can relate to that, Kat. it's like it's the worst.
Yeah.
And it's not until you start to live with it and get the help that you need and start understanding it a bit better that it starts to become a bit easier. You start to be able to find coping mechanisms and ways around it. But we'll get into that. That's a question for later in the podcast. But before we move on,
Mm-hmm.
I had an interesting question to ask you in terms of the experience stuff,
Mm-hmm.
because I've noticed, and I'm no psychiatrist here or any doctor, but I mean, this is obviously just a known fact, pretty much, that a lot of mental health illnesses, or just people that struggle with mental health in general, it tends to stem from childhood trauma
Yeah.
or unresolved childhood trauma, right? And I'm not saying that to be cliche. I'm not saying that to be like whatever, but like it's just genuinely true. Like, not in all cases, obviously. I'm not speaking in a general term. I'm just saying more often than not, it's usually something happened, like something traumatic happened early in someone's life, and it wasn't dealt with properly. Or how do you deal with that properly? I don't even begin to understand how you would deal with something like that properly, depending on what the severity of it is.
Yeah.
And the brain just takes over and goes, "Oh, we got to do this, this, this," and and like for me, obviously, I can only speak about my own experience. I don't know what other one else. That's why I want to start this podcast to get other people's perspectives on it, right?
Yeah.
But my brain was like, "Oh, depression, OCD, and anxiety. That's how we'll fix Taylor." And it's like, thanks, brain.
Yep.
You know what I mean? So it's like, my question to you, Kat, is where, like, if you had to make a guess, or you might even know at this point because you're 28 and you've lived with this for a while now, and you've been diagnosed professionally or whatever. Is there not a precise moment, where you can look back and be like, this is where it stems from, or like moments in general, like a collection of time or certain events that made you realize that all of this started happening inside of you? Is there anything that comes to mind in terms of that?
Yeah. I think before I talk about it, though, it's like I've talked about this before, and it's not specifically traumatic to me, as in like me talking about it doesn't like make me think of these things again. But I will be talking about like physical and mental abuse. So if like anybody's uncomfortable with that,
Yeah, it's a trigger warning just in case people.
yeah. So when I was 3 years old, I remember very distinctly my dad yelling at my mom, like screaming at her, but I was in my room. I left my room to see what happened, what was going on. Now, at this point, I do remember my parents screaming at each other, like a lot. But it never really got physical to what I saw. But what I saw, and I remember it so vaguely, like not vaguely, sorry, so like I remember it like step by step.
Ingrained in your memory.
Yeah, where my dad took my mom's head and slammed it against the mirror. And
Jesus.
yeah, and I didn't even know, like as a very young child, how to comprehend it.
Right. Like
my mom was bleeding, like profusely from the face. And I don't even think at that time I even knew what calling 911 was.
Right. You were at 3 years old, you said?
Yeah. And yeah. So my mom eventually called 911, I assume, because my dad got arrested and put in handcuffs.
Right.
And my mom went to the hospital, and I stayed with my aunt and my uncle. And I remember my mom having to talk to me about what had happened.
Right.
But I was already I didn't know at the time, but like traumatized because like my heart was beating through my chest. I had never seen anybody so violent. Obviously, I was very young.
Of course.
And my mom trying to justify that violence to me.
Yeah.
It's like, how do you do that? Especially because that's my dad.
Yeah.
Hurting somebody else that I care about.
Yeah.
So I remember at that point, at a very young age, I realized how evil people can be. And I stopped trusting my dad completely. Like, I felt uncomfortable around him. I didn't want to be alone with him because I didn't know what caused that shift in him.
Right.
I couldn't justify what had happened.
Well, there is no justification.
No, but in my
But
head,
you don't know that as a kid, obviously.
Yeah, I was trying to figure this out.
Right.
And then at 5, my dad was, because I was in kindergarten, so my dad was taken away again because he had like pulled a kitchen knife on my mom and like threatened to stab her.
Wow.
And at this point, my home life was just emotional abuse, physical abuse. Like, I was beaten up. I was like constantly like grabbed by my hair and thrown against the wall, like if I was in my dad's way. I lived in a house with very little food. I was constantly kicked out with my mom, and we like slept outside a lot. My house was like infested with like ticks. Not ticks.
Oh God.
Sorry. So they would like bite you and jump off of you.
Yeah.
And it was just awful. Like, my home life was just awful.
Yeah, it sounds very dramatic.
Yeah, and I was lucky enough because I was bilingual. So I grew up speaking French. I was able to go to a better school than I would have in my area because
Mimico?
Yeah, I like at the time it was more of a ghetto than it is now.
Yeah.
They really cleaned up the area.
Wow, speaking as someone that lives close to Mimico now, yeah, it's not as bad as it used to be. So
Yeah. So like I would walk past people who like would sit on mattresses and they would like they had needles in their arms. Like, I would just see this shit all the time.
I mean, that still happens, unfortunately. But go ahead, continue.
But yeah, so like, but I was able to go to a really good school, and I was in French immersion, and I know my mom did that so that I would have a better life.
That's good.
Yeah, and but I found out very early that my home life was not ideal because all of my friends were fucking rich.
Oh, yeah.
They lived in really nice houses. They like were able to take like ballet and like music lessons.
Right.
And so I would say those few years, like me seeing what happened and then seeing what life could be,
Yeah.
really fucked with my head as a kid.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would give you a weird complex, right?
Yeah. And
because you had nothing else to compare it to when you were younger.
Exactly. And
that was your life. And then when you go to a school and you start meeting other people and realizing that their lives aren't the same as yours, you go, wait a second, something's wrong here.
Yeah, exactly. And like the other thing that made me really distrust authority, and I think this is why I was diagnosed with conduct disorder especially, was that it felt like nobody cared. And I think that there were people in my life that actually didn't care, like my aunts and uncles. Like, they knew this was going on. Right. They didn't do anything.
Do you think they just stayed out of it because they didn't feel like it was their place? I'm not trying to justify what they did. I'm just saying, like,
no, I know what you're
putting yourself in their shoes. Like, do you think it wasn't their place to do anything about it, so they just stayed out of it, or were they scared, or?
I know the biggest reason, because I spoke to one of my aunts about this, like when I got older. Yeah. That they were very afraid of my dad.
See, yeah, that's what I figured.
Yeah, because he was like 6'1" or 2, like really tall man.
Yeah.
Very rough, kind of like yeah, like he was just like a very stereotypical like toxic masculinity kind of guy.
Right. And so you came from a house of abuse is what I'm getting from this, right? Like you were beaten up as a kid.
Yeah.
See, like this is the problem, man. Like the fucking 90s and early 2000s were so notorious, and it still happens to this day. I'm not excusing it, but like that was the way that it wasn't even there was not even an eye batted at it. Like that was just the way you raised kids back then,
Yeah. Like even
which
something
is
as
disgusting. But then look at the generation we're living in now, where like I don't even know what the stat is. I'm not gonna claim that I know what the stat is, but if I had to guess, I'd say over 50% of the millennials are dealing with some sort of mental health issue
yeah.
or some form of depression. I mean, like it's obvious. Like look around.
Oh yeah. Like I think too that millennials are becoming more like okay with talking about it too. Like I think people like in Gen X or boomers, I think they also have intense mental issues,
Oh,
but
absolutely.
they think it's the way they were brought up to think of mental illness is so different than how millennials and Gen Z are.
Yeah, of
Um,
course.
like I feel like very comfortable around a lot of Gen Z people because I kind of feel like we're in this together.
Yeah, I mean, like we're both growing up in this period of forward thinking.
Yeah,
You know, we're not. It's not. I mean, it's still taboo, unfortunately, but like it's starting. We're starting to take down the walls a little bit.
yeah, exactly. Like I like that. I like how fast progress is because, like, when we were kids, seeing a gay person was like not weird, and it wasn't even seen like, especially for me and a lot of people around me, it wasn't even seen as like bad. Like
Yeah.
my best friend in high school was an out gay man, a gay boy. He's a gay man now, but I mean,
Yes.
so like there was nothing bizarre about that. But then
Mm-hmm.
Gen X, that would have been like not all Gen X. Obviously, I'm not going to put everybody in
Lump in a
yeah,
category. Yeah.
but like as we keep going,
Yeah.
everything's becoming more accepted, and I love that. And like Gen Z, they are so fucking smart. Like I cannot believe how fast they just pick up on things and are able to like be empathetic towards people that aren't like them.
Yeah. Well, I think we're living in a day of age right now, and like I could be wrong with this, but as a millennial, but I feel like everything is so easily accessible these days. Whereas when you and I, Kat, were growing up, there's barely an internet.
Yeah,
Like we had dial up and a computer that was like the size of a doghouse. Like it was,
back in my day, yeah,
and you couldn't be on the phone at the same time as the internet, or else it would cut out. Like it's like there was no access to information when we were younger. If you wanted information, you had to go to a library and read a book.
yeah. Like okay, so again, this is another like tangent, but like I knew that I was bisexual growing up. I knew I had feelings for women or girls when I was younger, right? Other people my
Yeah.
age. But I also had feelings for men as well. And I was like, well, I can't be gay because I have feelings for guys, but I'm confused. Like, I didn't know what bisexual was.
Right, because that's one of those. I mean, obviously, I'm a straight white male over here. I'm learning still about you know the LGBTQ plus community and sexuality and gender fluidity and all that kind of stuff. Because, like you said, the Gen Zs are just on it now. Like
They just know.
we're in the future. Like this is 2021. This is the way this way. And like I'm on board. Like I'm not saying I'm not by any means am I against it because I'm not. Like I have gay friends. Like I've always been a big supporter of gay rights since I can remember.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, that's an interesting situation to bring up because I feel like that has a lot to do with mental health because of when you and I grew up. I mean, thank God you had a good experience with it, or so you've been saying.
Yes.
But a lot of people don't have good experiences with it
No.
because, I mean, if you grow up in the city like Toronto, usually the cities are forward thinking, or like there's a lot of people that are adjusted to it.
Yeah.
Whereas if you grow up in a small town like I did, there's no There's none of that, right? Like, there's no diversity. There's no, like, it doesn't reach that far, or at least it didn't reach that far in like the 90s, the early 2000s, or even the 2010s. Like, it's not until a few years ago, I'd say, where it's become more inclusive in more places.
Yeah, and like there's even places like when I moved to Regina, I immediately noticed how different the mentality was here. Like
I can imagine.
casual racism, man. Like just like
Oh God.
I was told. So I am Métis. I'm half Métis, so I'm a quarter Mohawk. But I'm very white looking, like you would not be able to tell. So
Is that called white passing? Is that what that is?
white passing. So when I got to Saskatchewan, I heard shit about Native American people that makes my skin crawl. Like people literally, like I was told at my first job here that they did not want to hire Native Americans because they never showed up for work. They just told me that.
Yeah.
Like,
so they're just, yeah, that's horrible.
And I was like, what the hell is going on here? Because I grew up in Canada that I thought was very inclusive. Now I know that there are people who are racist and there are people who are undercover racist, like, or they don't think they're racist, but they're saying things that are racist, right?
Yep.
But it was like they were saying things that they would, like, people would only feel comfortable saying in their living rooms to a specific type of people.
Right.
And they were just going off to me about how much they didn't like certain demographics.
Yeah.
And it shocked me.
Right.
I think that there were still people that existed like that.
Oh, and I mean, we could go into this forever, I'm sure.
Yeah.
I mean, you and I are pretty much on the same page ideologically, which is great. That's why we're friends.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, unfortunately, I think there's always going to be people like that. There's always going to be extremists on either side of the spectrum.
Yeah.
No matter what topic you talk about, it's just it's lack of knowledge. It's lack of experience. It's lack of reaching out. It's a lack of a lot of things that make these people. But that's a whole other thing. We're not going to get into that.
Yeah. I
This
know.
episode's about you, Kat.
I'm sorry. It's ADHD. It's acting up again.
Fuck those people.
Yeah, fuck those people though. Like, I hope that they are able to open their minds and like be able to be spoken to. Like,
yeah, actually, let me retract that statement because I don't want to be abrasive about it. I don't hate those people. I want them to understand. I want them to take the time to learn.
Yeah.
You know, because if we don't teach them, they're never going to learn.
Yeah, like I know what you meant totally, TJ, because like you and I, we've been friends for so long.
Yes.
But yeah, like for anybody listening, like I know that TJ wants everyone to understand like why, like what makes people different and why that's okay.
Yes.
That's why he created this podcast, right?
That's why I'm talking to you right now.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like I know that like if it's possible for somebody to be reached, then we have to reach them somehow,
Yes.
some way.
Yes.
But sometimes it's really, like, I hate saying it, but sometimes it really is just not possible.
That they're just so far gone.
Yeah, or it's not possible at that moment.
Yeah. It takes time.
Yeah, it takes time, and especially for mental health awareness. Like if we want to get back to like that topic,
yeah,
it's the same thing. It's like it's going to be an uphill battle. But we have to kind of try to say to like people who feel that they don't have a mental health issue, maybe they do. They're only damaging themselves and maybe the people that they love, their children, their family,
their
friends by saying that it doesn't exist. Because if we say it exists, because it does, then they're able to. Then maybe programs will come out that like make psychiatry and psychology more accessible.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so like it's only ever a positive.
Yeah, and I'll add to that, like, I must say, it's come a long way.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm pretty proud of where we are. And there's a lot of work to be done still. I acknowledge that, but it has come pretty far. Like the fact that I can even have this podcast and it not be flagged by Spotify or Apple Podcasts or, wherever my podcast is shipped to for people to listen.
Mm-hmm.
Like they're going up and I'm not getting flagged and people are listening to it.
Yes.
And I'm getting wonderful comments and stuff like that. So the fact that we're in a day and age where I can do this and we can talk about these heavy issues that were never talked about before.
Exactly. Yeah.
Is a huge progress in my mind.
Yeah, and I'm excited because like I think one day it'll just be normalized, and taking medication will be more normalized, and just yeah, it'll just be like, yeah, I have a mental disorder, I have a learning disability, or I have a mental illness, and that's cool.
It'll just be like saying you have a driver's license.
Yeah.
I got a mental health illness.
Exactly.
Oh, which one did you get?
Like take out a briefcase, you open it up.
It'll be like trading cards.
Yo,
I'll trade you my depression for your OCD.
oh man. You wanna?
Oh man, sorry. This is the dark humor section of
Yeah,
this podcast.
yeah. Hello.
This is called coping mechanisms. Yeah. Everybody.
What the kids call a cope, right?
Speaking of dark.
Yes.
I like to call this segment of the podcast the real reels.
Okay.
So this is where it gets pretty raw, if the guest so chooses to make it raw.
Mm-hmm.
So trigger warning in advance if anybody doesn't like talking about these sort of things. I mean, Kat's already touched about a lot of them already, but it may get darker. I don't know. But you got to get through the dark stuff to get to the light, right? Like that's just the way it goes.
Mm-hmm.
So the next question is, what are some of the hardest moments for you in your experience so far? Like, what are the most negatives that have been caused by your mental health?
Well, it would definitely be the multiple times I have tried to kill myself. The first time I ever tried to kill myself was the one that very nearly succeeded. I was in grade 8 and I slit my wrists in the bathtub, but I did not die. Thankfully, I'm very happy that I'm here.
I am very happy that did not happen, or else I would never have met you.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing is like, when you are in the mind of, I can't take this anymore, the only way for me to feel a release from this feeling is to die.
Yep.
It's just like, even thinking about it now is just scary, because I sometimes even think like, how did my brain even do that to me?
It's terrifying.
Yeah, like, but I felt like I was lost and I couldn't talk to anybody.
Yep.
And people always say you should reach out if you feel like that, but it's so hard because I feel like what almost always happens is that people blame themselves, or they don't believe you, or like I that was my experience. I'm not saying that would be your experience, because I do think that there are so many people out there that want to help you. And even if you don't feel like there's anybody you can talk to, there are like helplines and there are communities that will help you. But I tried to commit suicide again and again.
How many times in total?
I think 5.
5 times. Wow.
Yeah. The other 4 attempts were not as severe. Like they were mostly just like overdosing. Like I knew I was doing it to kill myself.
Right.
But I immediately regretted it and like threw up.
Yeah. Isn't that the worst?
Yeah.
This is your experience, obviously, and I'm not trying to take away from it. Like this is your podcast. But yeah, I can just heavily relate to that because obviously and anybody that's listened to this podcast knows that I've had my fair share of suicide attempts as well.
Hmm.
Um, the first time I ever tried, I was there was no exit plan. There was no remorse. I wanted to die.
Hmm.
But every time since then has been an immediate shock and reaction and why am I doing this?
Yeah.
So it's funny how that works that way. I don't know if it's with everybody or just certain people, but like the first time for me at least, and it sounds like for you, it was like that's it, we're done.
Hmm.
Like, and then it didn't happen, thank God. Um, and then every other time since then has still been as serious. I'm not taking away, and like it sounds like yours were also serious.
Hmm.
Um, but there's always that immediate, oh God, what did I do?
Yeah. And I don't know why I personally immediately regretted all those other times because like you said, like I didn't have any regrets.
Yeah.
Or the first time, like I was actually disappointed that I survived.
Oof, isn't that the fucking worst feeling?
Yeah. And like I had to acknowledge in myself that I had to keep living. And that was a big disappointment for me. And that's like, I'm sorry if that like upsets anybody, but like,
Don't apologize. Don't apologize. That for listeners, like this is why I started this podcast is to be real because this is the kind of stuff you don't see.
yeah,
They don't market this. They don't. This is the dark side of it that they don't talk about.
yeah, because like now being like, how old are you in grade 8? Like
Like
13,
12,
14? Like, yeah, 13, 14, I think. So that is,
somewhere around there.
yeah, so that's like almost, that's like 15, 16 years ago. Um, I definitely am happy that I am alive, like I said before, right? I don't regret that I like now that I'm here because I wouldn't have experienced all the positive things that I experienced, even though there were bad times as well.
Yeah.
Like I've said before in the podcast that like I suffered from like drug abuse. Like I was heavily addicted to drugs in grade 9. I was doing things I shouldn't. I'm not supposed to.
Yes. Illicit drugs.
Yeah. I I got addicted to drugs again in my early 20s.
So you were an addict then.
Yeah.
I know you and I touched upon this as we started to become friends. It's bonding over trauma.
Yeah.
But for the listeners listening, like I'm just confirming you were like an addict.
I was in grade 9. I was an addict, and I classified myself as an addict because I couldn't I couldn't like cope without drinking or doing drugs.
Yeah.
I was really young too, and like because like this was shortly after I tried to kill myself, and I couldn't figure out what to do.
Right.
So I got into the wrong crowd, and I did a lot of bad things.
Yeah.
What pulled me out of that whole thing was friendship. Honestly, like I'm not saying it's the only thing, but just having people who were there for me and I felt truly cared about me mattered. And
Absolutely.
it helped me survive.
Yep.
But I didn't tell anybody that I was addicted to drugs. Like if they didn't know, I didn't tell anybody.
Did anybody know that you were suicidal?
No.
See, that's the thing, right? Like, it's so tough with dealing with this delicate subject, but like, yeah, like you said, like you just feel so alone in it, and you may not be alone, but it's the depression. it's the mental illness that's making you think these things. And like, that's kind of, I want to break down this wall because it's so negatively stigmatized.
Yeah,
Suicide, right? Like, it's a hot subject, obviously. People are talking about it now, but like, they're not talking about it, I think, in the right way.
yeah, I agree. Like, I think it went to the point where it was like, how do I say this? Like, when people killed themselves, when I was growing up, it was seen as like two ends of the spectrum. It was cowardly or it
Yeah.
was praised. Like, it was like
God.
she did or they did such a incredible thing because
Right.
that's the only thing they could do to get out of that situation.
Or it's like, oh, how brave of them.
How,
They took that leap,
yeah,
which is such a weird way to phrase that.
yeah. And like media does that too. Like, I think, like, for example, like with the 13 Reasons Why,
I hate that show.
it was very irresponsible in the way
Yeah,
it handled.
oh, absolutely. Like, I understand the premise. Sorry, Kat.
Yep.
I understand the premise of the show, and it's based off a book, I'm pretty sure, if I'm not
Yeah.
mistaken. So I haven't read the book, so please don't attack me if I get this wrong. But the show, to me, yeah, it just didn't handle it very well at all, and I didn't really like the approach they took with it. And then the amount of, what do I say? The amount of stuff that came out afterwards with that show,
Yeah,
of it being glamorized and
yeah,
making it trendy to kill yourself, like that's so fucked up.
yeah. And like again, like I'm with TJ as well. Like, I didn't read the book, so I'm talking purely on the show and the impact that had. I think that with such a delicate subject, I think it needs to be handled in a certain way, but oftentimes media doesn't handle it in a certain way because, and I'm not even saying media is evil. I'm just saying that, like, a story needs to have a climax or a progression. But the thing with mental illness is that media always gets it wrong because when you have your biggest episode, that's usually in the middle of your recovery, not the end.
Yeah.
But the biggest episode that a character will have is like, now they're fine afterwards. Like, there's nothing else happened in their life, the end, right? Even though a lot of people want to say the media does not affect real life, it does. Like, I'm not saying, yeah, like, I'm not saying that, like, if you see somebody who kills somebody on TV, you're going to kill somebody. I'm just saying that there are stereotypes that get hardwired into your head.
Yep. Yeah, that's such a huge impact for sure.
Yeah, or it mirrors real life. Like, if people are like already have a negative opinion about mental illness, sometimes a show will just do that because the narrative is already written for them in real life. They don't have to explain anything.
Right. I will say, on the topic of TV shows, and then we'll get back to the the matter at hand here. Have you seen that show Euphoria?
I've not.
With Zendaya? I gotta say, that's a really good representation of mental health on a TV show.
Okay, well,
It's one of the best that I've seen.
Huh.
Like, I'm not mad at it. Like, everything that I've watched the first season with Lena, my roommate, because she was the one that told me about it. She's like, you got to watch this show because I thought about you when I watched it, and I was like, oh, okay. So the main character has a drug problem.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they're an addict, right? And they're suicidal, and it's it's basically just a day in the life of a teen struggling with mental health.
Okay.
And I found out that the writer and director actually went to rehab.
Oh.
Like, it's coming from a place of personal experience. So he's the one that directs and writes the show. So it's comforting that someone that has actually been through it is the one directing it. It's their perspective of what their experience was like, just on a grander scale because of TV, obviously. But
right.
But yeah, it's handled very delicately, and I think it's a really good show to represent. I mean, it's a very sad show,
Hmm.
but it has to be real. There's
Yeah,
no other way to depict this kind of stuff other than it being real. Like people need to see the dark.
yeah. Like it's uh, it's stressful for me, and I assume most people with mental illness go through this. There's always this like fear that if they're found out, even if they have something as like even if they have like depression and anxiety, like I'm not undermining it, I'm just saying like something that is more, I'm saying that it's more okay in society to have depression and anxiety than other things. There's still this fear that you'll be looked different or you'll be treated like a child or
Yeah,
people will just have a different perception of you. So no one wants to talk about it, even when it gets really bad, like to the point where they need to seek help.
right. I feel like a big thing too is that a lot of people don't know how to deal with it. So I had my friend Adriano on the podcast, this third episode,
Mhm.
and he deals with his own side of mental health. Like he's a germaphobe, a really bad germaphobe. So that's his experience with it. And he has days where he's depressed and stuff like that. He hasn't ever been formally diagnosed, but like I said, it doesn't matter. Whatever's valid is valid to you.
Mhm.
But he tends to feel like he doesn't deal with the extremes that somebody like you and I have to go through, right?
Yeah.
So it was interesting having him on the show and talk about his experience about being the one on the outside trying to help somebody with a severe mental health illness. Not taking away from what he has, I'm just saying like um, it's just interesting to me like we've come a long way, yes, but a lot of people still don't know how to if even if they are open about it and are not against mental health, like they believe in it and they know that it's true, but it's how do you help someone with that? Like you don't get taught that in school. You don't get unless you have a direct friend that deals with it. It's always just on the news or in social media. Like there's never any firsthand interaction with it. So like these people get in these situations and they don't know how to handle it. So that I think that's why it's so taboo and it's so stigmatized still is because people never learned about it properly and they don't know how to handle the situation if somebody comes to them and goes, "Hey, I'm suicidal. I need help."
Yeah. I actually, yeah, like when you said that, that like immediately put like a memory in my head of like you and I talking about our mental illness and mental illnesses and how relieved I felt that I could actually speak to somebody and feel connected
Right.
because I don't know if they experienced mental health issues or they were just they didn't want to talk about it, but most of the people that I tried to speak to, they did their best. Like I was around some pretty good people.
Yeah.
When if I spoke to you about mental illness, I usually trusted you, right?
Sure. Sure.
They were very well meaning. Like they were just like, I don't understand, but like I'm here for you.
Yeah.
And I really appreciated that.
Of course.
But it's like, of course, like how in their head they're probably like, well, what am I supposed to do?
Mm-hmm.
Like I love Kat and I want her to succeed, but I don't know what to do for her.
Yes. Yeah.
I totally understand that because even me, and I've dealt with mental illness when people have come to me and told me I don't even know what to say sometimes.
Right. Right.
So
I'd like to make the point of I mean, I'm going to speak from my perspective again. I know we keep having to preface this, but like, I think people understand by now that it's coming from our experiences only. Like, this isn't the end all be all answer. But all I don't expect people to be the hero.
mhm,
Like, if I come to you and like again, this is just my perspective of things, but like, whenever I did reach out to anybody in my lowest points, it was more for comfort than answers. Like, I never expected somebody to solve my problems for me. Because that's not fair to them. Because, like you said, they might not understand. Like they want to be there for you, and they will be there for you if they're good friends. which is all you could ask for. Honestly, like when I come to you as a friend and I tell you these things, it's like Kat said, I trust you enough to tell you about these things.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not looking for answers. I'm not looking for you to solve my problems. I'm reaching out because I know I need the support system to get me through this moment.
Yes.
And so any listener that's listening right now, if you have a friend or a loved one, a pet, whatever, somebody in your life that's dealing with it and that comes to you often or just once, all you have to do, honestly, is just be there for them in any way you can.
Yeah.
That's the best advice. That's the best advice I have is just listen to them. Just make sure they're heard. Make sure they feel valid. Give them a hug. Give them a kiss if they're a loved one. Just take them to see somebody if it's really bad.
Yeah.
But yeah, just listen, man. Like that's honestly the best thing you could do.
Yeah. And like, even for me, like, all I want when I speak to somebody about it, well, the first thing is to not say that it doesn't exist, because, you know, anybody listening out there who has ADHD, diagnosed or not, we get that all the time, that it doesn't exist. But the other thing that I would like is that I want you to understand why I do the things that I do. That doesn't necessarily make them okay. Like, my ADHD will sometimes make me late for appointments. That is still something that is my fault. And I don't beat myself up about it, but I'm just saying it's something that I do need to work on, because it does hurt the people in my life if I'm late. But I also want them to understand that I didn't do it because I dislike them or like it has something to do with them.
Right.
I want them to understand that I am trying, but sometimes I just miss the ball.
Yeah.
And that's why. Like when I try so hard to compensate, because I know that a lot of people don't understand that, like, I will be like sometimes like 30 to an hour early, like 30 minutes to an hour early, because I just want to make sure.
Overcompensate for the fact.
Yeah.
Wow. It's crazy, man.
Mm-hmm.
You're a good person, Kat. You're a good person.
Well, you are too.
Thanks, man. Well, okay, so let's get to the next segment because it feels like we're coming out of the negative now.
Yeah.
We got through the hard shit. In Nicole's episode, I started making segments, which I didn't do before, but I'm going to start doing it now. So this segment I like to call the rainbow segment.
Yeah.
Whereas basically, you know, coming out of the darkest moments of our life, or just, you know, starting to see more of the positives is what I like to call this section.
Yeah.
So, yeah, Kat, are there any positive things that you've discovered or still finding out about living with your mental health illnesses?
There are actually a lot of positives for me. Like, I think that the fact that I've dealt with depression, anxiety, I think that it's made me more empathetic towards everybody, because I completely understand where your mind is when you are afraid to, like, speak to somebody at a party, or you don't want to, like, go to a club, or you're like afraid of public speaking, right?
Right.
I know that I do my best. Like, I'll talk about this one experience I had at a job that I had. There was this woman that I worked with who was very shy, and she didn't want to do an activity. It wasn't a work activity. It was like a bonding activity, but she didn't want to do this one thing. And people there were pressuring her to do it. And that was upsetting me, because I could see the look on her face being like, I told them multiple times I don't want to do it. So I said, hey guys, like, back off. Like, she just doesn't want to do it. Like, I'll take her turn. And, you know, she thanked me because I saw that she was in distress. And just things like that, I think that has made me a better person. Like, I'm not saying you need to have depression, anxiety to be a better person, but I'm saying that because I've been in that headspace, I know how much it can break you down. If you put the pressure off that person, it really helps.
Absolutely. Yeah, of course.
Instead of just saying, hey, don't worry about it, like it's dismissive, be like, hey, like I understand that you're going through this thing. Here's how I cope.
Right. So it's almost like you're saying, like, now that you've lived through what you've lived through, it's a positive way for you, or this to come out of what you've dealt with is kind of passing the torch a little bit. Like you said, you're more empathetic now, so like you start seeing things that you might not normally have seen.
Yeah, and I think because I have passed the point of like being afraid of the stigma of being like disliked, or like for speaking up for somebody else who might be struggling.
Right.
I'm able to do that because I think there was a point where, well, I won't say think, I'll just be honest. There was a point where even though I was suffering from mental illness, I would do the same thing that other people did because I wanted to fit in. Like be like, oh, it's not that big of a deal, even though I knew in my head, because I deal with it, it is.
Right.
But yeah, being on the other side of it, I was able to speak to people on that level instead of dismissing it.
That's great.
Yeah, I think it's definitely benefited my social connections. But with ADHD specifically, I kind of, on my best days, I look at it as like a superpower. There are a lot of people, I think, like it's pseudoscience, but it kind of makes me feel powerful because there's concepts like called like indigo children, or like people who like are different, but they have like special powers because they're different. And it's kind of cool to think like, oh, like just because I'm different, it doesn't mean I'm, like I said, like I'm broken, or like I don't have specific abilities that I can use to get through the day. Like one superpower I have is hyper focus. So
yeah,
in like 2 weekends ago, so this is a negative that was turned into a positive.
That's great.
I could not focus, TJ, at all.
Wow.
On anything. Like I was also on my period, and when I'm on my period, I get like brain fog.
Sure.
But then I had the ADHD, so it was just like I couldn't do anything.
You were just lost.
I was just lost. I just couldn't focus at all, and I had 20 articles to do. They were each like 600 words, so I had like a total of like 14,000 words to do. About.
It's a lot of words.
Yeah. And it was Saturday night, and I didn't do any work that week. And I was completely breaking down. Like I was terrified that I wasn't going to make this, and I was just going to like lose my job. Like it was just like going like from A to B and C, and like to the point. Yeah.
Catastrophizing.
Yeah. But I went to my husband and I told him, look, I don't know what to do. Like I feel so overwhelmed. I'm stressed. And I just talked to him for an hour, and I felt better. And I was like, okay, I can do this. And I went upstairs, I pulled an all-nighter, and I did the 20 words, and I met my deadline.
There you go.
And I wouldn't recommend, pulling all-nighters all the time, but no. I was able to, with my superpower, with my hyperfocus, I was able to do it.
Yeah. Get it done when you need to get it done.
Exactly. So, although there are some negatives associated with ADHD, I think there are so many positives to it.
Yeah. I mean, you got to look at it that way too, right? Because if you it's all about a mindset. If you keep thinking negatively, then all you're going to feel is negative.
Yeah, exactly. Like,
so if you start turning like positive twists on it, then hopefully that tells your brain, you know what? No, this is okay. I can do this. I can manage this shit.
Yeah. And I'm just, sometimes I'm even glad I have it, honestly, because like I feel like I don't want to sound braggy, but I feel like I'm smarter than most people. I feel like I'm able to catch on to things really quickly, and like I'm able to just like when I'm like focused, I can like just really do anything.
Yeah, I mean, like, from somebody that knows you and has known you for, God, over 10 years now or something like that,
Yeah.
I would say that you're very analytical.
Hmm.
You've always been able to break things down uh, in ways that don't make sense to me, but but yeah, you're very thoughtful in the way that you approach things, which is kind of cool.
Thank you.
Uh, and you're also very sporadic, which is also something I love about you. Is that like every time I talk to you, it's always something different, and I'm like, whoa, cat's on it again.
Yeah, that's I just can't sit still, and I managed to like channel my like risky behavior into or like impulsivity into my business. So I've been able to scale my business as fast as I have because I am not physically able to really understand the consequences, which is a bad thing, but I think it can be turned into a positive.
Sure, it's like a healthy balance, right?
Yeah,
As
like
long as you're finding a healthy balance between the two, you'll be all right.
exactly.
Well, that kind of leads me to my next point, and you kind of already talked about it a little bit, but if you care to elaborate a bit more, that'd be great. Just for listeners, have you found any constructive ways or solutions in dealing or coping with your mental health struggles and/or illnesses?
Yes, so I'm not even ashamed to say this. Medication has helped me so much. Like,
Good, and you shouldn't be ashamed to say that. And I'm glad you said that because, again, it's another negative stigmatized thing. And I was guilty of it for years of feeling ashamed for being on medication. And I went off medication because of the shame,
yeah, like,
right? And then I went down a spiral, and and I'm not on medication currently, even though I probably should be. Um, it's just logistically difficult right now with COVID, but
yeah,
especially if you live in Ontario like I do. um,
yeah.
but sorry, continue. Go ahead.
Oh yeah. With the medication, as I said before, it was like turning on a light. Like I'm able to function at a level that I feel like it's not so much of a struggle to get work done or to even just do like everyday things like washing the dishes. Um, but even before that, I had a few things in place that I still use, but they're just better now with medication. Like the biggest thing I learned with ADHD and time management, because people with ADHD, we're time blind. Like there are some days where I'll just stare at a wall for 2 hours and I think it's 10 minutes.
Wow.
And I'm doing nothing, TJ. Like I'm just like looking at a wall.
Shit.
Yeah. Cause like I think it's just because I'm too like overstimulated. Or
Right.
I'm
So
too
it's not like you're doing nothing. Like your mind's working a mile a minute, which makes you do nothing.
yeah. But the best thing I think for people with ADHD that's worked for me is to just like mind dump like everything that you're thinking of, so you don't keep putting it in your head. Like it's circulating in your head. Um, you write like for things you have to do. I like to do like now, soon, later, like these 3 columns. I learned this from another person with ADHD. So like the things I have to do now are like less than 30 minutes. Like they're really quick tasks like washing the dishes, dusting, taking the trash out, something like that. And then like soon is like those are like my articles because they take longer than 30 minutes. Or just like tax things, like things that I have to do within the week, but they're not incredibly apparent. I'll do like 2 or 3 of those things per day. And then later are like things that don't really have a time limit. And then when I have time or they become more important, like if the deadline gets closer, like if I want to take a trip,
Right.
it'll go into soon and it'll go into now.
Cool.
So that has helped me. Like if an ADHD person sees a task that's like too difficult, they just won't do it. That's me,
Right.
right?
Right.
But if you break it down into smaller parts, it makes it so much easier.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's huge.
Yeah.
I'm glad that that helps you and that you found that as a good solution for you to keep yourself on track and to battle the ADHD. That kind of answers the question I was asked. I was just curious. Earlier in the podcast, we talked about how with your ADHD, the medication does help, but you still have to be actively conscious about what you're doing as well on top of that, right? So I
Yeah.
was curious about that. I was like, is there some coping stuff going on there with the medication that you've been doing? And I guess making those to-do lists are probably the biggest one.
Yeah.
So that probably answers my question. But if there's anything else maybe that came along with like maybe before you started doing the to-do list, was there just for the listeners that have ADHD that maybe to-do lists aren't their thing? Like maybe they have a hard time with to-do lists. Are there other ways that you think coping with ADHD along with medication helps you keep focused in any way?
Yeah. The ironic thing about ADHD is that we thrive on structure, but it's almost impossible for us to keep a structure.
Right.
I have a job where I am my own boss, so I have to create structure for myself.
Mm-hmm.
So what I did before that helped me even without medication, I still do this now, but this helped a lot, was that I'll manufacture deadlines. So like when I was in high school, I would do everything last minute. Mostly because I didn't want to do it, but also because I had a job and I wanted to spend time with my friends. Like I had a big social circle when I was a kid.
Right.
But what I would do is like, oh God, like I'm looking at my week and I'm not going to be able to do this. Like this is the only night that I can do this. Like maybe it's tomorrow, right?
Right.
But if it's due on Monday, but the only day I have to do it is Tuesday, I'm not going to think like, oh, well, it's due Monday, so just wait. But I'll
Right.
have no time to do that. So what I think to myself is, it's due Tuesday. And I keep thinking it's due Tuesday, it's due Tuesday, it's due Tuesday.
Mm.
And then my mind starts to believe it's due Tuesday. And then I'll do it on Tuesday.
There you go. So it's like manifesting your own destiny.
Yeah, like people with ADHD, they work the best under stress, unfortunately.
Yeah.
I kept saying, like, I don't want to be like this. Like, I want to be able to do like work in small steps, but I can't.
Right.
I have to either do it all in one go,
Mm-hmm.
or it's like all or nothing.
Yes. Yes. I've seen. That's what made me think that I have ADHD because I'm exactly like that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm so horribly task oriented. It's brutal.
Well,
Like,
maybe you do.
what's that?
Well, maybe you do. Like, it's
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like, maybe it's just undiagnosed and I just had it forever. And like, the more this podcast goes on, the more I'm like, maybe I do. Because like I'll make a to-do list because my psychiatrist. Sorry, Kat. We'll get back to what you were saying before, but
oh yeah, yeah.
just to piggyback on your thing there. My psychiatrist told me to start writing a journal, for my thoughts, my depression and stuff, to get it out rather than keep it in my brain.
Mm-hmm.
And she's like, right now, especially because of COVID, it's very important for people that have lost their job, like I have, to make a to-do list of things that they're passionate about or things they want to do or just stuff to keep them busy during the day so that my mind doesn't wander into these dark places like it usually does, right?
Yep.
But the thing with me is like I'll make this to-do list and I'm like so hyper focused on getting it done that I'll just do everything on the to-do list ASAP. Like I'll try to get it all done in one day.
Mm-hmm.
And I hate it because then I'll spend the whole day burning myself out getting all of this shit done. And then I'll wake up tomorrow and be like, well, fuck, I have nothing to do today.
Yeah.
Because I did it all yesterday, Like instead of spacing it out and giving myself things to do that I could do better because I can give myself more time to do said thing, I just do it all at once.
Yeah.
Because I see this list in front of me, I'm like, oh, I got to get it done.
Yeah. I I totally feel that. Like in my head, if I like don't do everything on my to-do list, I feel like a failure.
Yeah, like it irks me.
Yeah, like I even like thought about this. I'm like, do other people think this way? Like I'm pretty sure most people don't think this way. Like
I'm sure there's some people, me, and
no,
then
yeah, but I'm saying people who like don't have ADHD. I
oh, sure, okay.
I see like people who are like, oh yeah, like I couldn't get to it today, but I'll do it tomorrow, and they'll just do it tomorrow. And I'm just
Right. They're no nonchalant about it, but we're like dying over here.
yeah. You've actually I was going to talk about this at some point, but you've described rejection sensitivity, which a lot of people with ADHD have. I think it's like as high as 99% or 95 to 99, who have these insane expectations of themselves, this perfectionism, because they don't want to disappoint themselves and they don't want to disappoint others.
Right.
So for me, I will take on more work than I know I can do because I want to impress somebody like my clients or myself.
Right.
And then with the to-do list, it's the same thing. Like if I don't make a to-do list properly, that's why I started doing the now, soon, later thing.
Right.
I will just be destroyed. Like,
yeah,
it affects me so deeply, and I get like angry.
Yep. Yeah. Absolutely.
Like, it just manifests, and then like I feel embarrassed because of how angry I got. It's just a whole thing. You know?
Yeah. No. Totally. And I mean, I understand that now because I feel like I'm undiagnosed with it probably at this point.
I mean,
I could be wrong, but like I don't know. Like it feels to me like that's something that I struggle with as well. And I'm sure a lot of listeners that are listening to the pod that I mean, I would love everybody to listen to the podcast, obviously, but I'm sure most of my listeners obviously deal with mental health in their own right. If anybody else is dealing with ADHD, I'm sure they also heavily relate to what we're talking about in terms of this, like, and which is good and bad. Like, obviously, it's good the fact that we're not alone.
Yeah.
Like the whole theme of this podcast, like we're not alone. Like, I bring guests on like Kat who has this to discuss it openly, and so other people be like, oh, that's good. Like I'm not alone in this. Like yeah, no, you're not. Like there's millions of people probably that deal with this.
Oh yeah, like, and the same thing too is like ADHD, autism, and OCD. There's a lot of like symptoms that overlap.
Yes.
So even if you have autism, you may even relate to me, or if I'm listening to somebody who has autism, it's the same thing. Right. I might relate to them as well.
Yeah, well, maybe it comes down to my OCD then, because I've been diagnosed with OCD, so maybe that's a crossover symptom. I don't know.
Yeah, like it definitely could be because like there's just so many similarities between the two. And they manifest in similar ways. Like, there's big differences to why like one is one and not the other.
Right.
But I think it's kind of funny that I usually make the best of friends with people who are autistic or have ADHD or have OCD. Like almost all of my best friends have these disorders. And I think it's just because we find each other because we think alike.
Yeah. I mean, that tends to happen, right?
Yeah. And like, they might not even know. I didn't even know. And then it comes out and it's like, oh, okay.
Well, it makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. You tend to align with people that obviously align with you, right? So.
Yeah.
Well, Kat, I think that's it's almost a wrap.
Oh.
My final question for you today is just any final thoughts or feelings that you want to express to the listeners? Could be a message of hope, any advice for people dealing with similar issues, anything like that?
Yeah. I was always told when I had a mental illness that it gets better. And when you're in the mindset of feeling like it won't, it really just hangs on deaf ears. Like want to hear it gets better because it feels so oppressive. Like our mental illnesses feel like this is it. Like we're going to be this way forever. And even though I can say that there's a lot of mental illnesses that won't go away, I know that if you take the time to give yourself a little bit of self-love and practice acceptance in yourself, I think that it will get better in the sense that you'll feel more comfortable with yourself and talking to people. And in that way, I think it gets better.
Wow, well said. No, it's totally true. I feel the same way, and that's such a thoughtful way to put it.
Thank you. I just want everyone to know that, yeah, they're not alone. Like, having ADHD can be tough, and it can be really tough when people don't accept you or even think that you're lying. But you will find that there are tons of people that will accept you. It's just like it's honestly just a matter of time. And the more you open up and the more that you talk to others, like it will happen. Like I'm talking to somebody who I've known like right now for over 10 years.
Yep.
And we started talking about our trauma very early because we just felt that connection
Yep.
with each other. And I know that even if it's just one friend, because you don't have to be Mr. Popular and Mrs. Popular or you don't have to be that.
No, definitely not. No.
Yeah, if you find somebody who understands you, I think that's enough.
Absolutely, man. Yeah, the important thing is, out of all of that, just talk to somebody.
Yeah.
Like Kat said, like there's people out there that are going through similar things. Like you're not alone in this, and there's plenty of people that'll relate to your situation, and it's just so important to talk about things. And that's like I said before, that's why I started the podcast. That's why I have all these guests come on. It's why we talk about it so openly. It's an open dialogue. It's so important these days, just especially during this pandemic. People going through all the stuff they're going through. It's just so important to have an open dialogue and just reach out. Like it's so important to reach out. Introverted or extroverted, it doesn't matter. Like it's just important to have people in your life that relate to you on a deeper level.
Yeah.
Or it's just there for you. Like it doesn't like we said earlier. It's like it doesn't matter if they get you or not get you in the terms of mental health. It's like as long as they're there for you and will listen to you.
Oh yeah, like that. Like I said, I've had so many friends that they can't understand me on a personal level like that, but were they there for me? Absolutely.
Yeah, and sometimes that's all you need.
Mm-hmm.
And please, for the love of God, if you feel like you're gonna do something drastic, call Kids Help Phone or call a crisis hotline or go to just take yourself to the hospital or call 911 or like whatever you need to do to get yourself out of the situation. Do it.
Please, like we want you here. I know that I don't know everybody personally who's listening to this podcast, but I am so happy that I'm here.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, like life is hard. It is so hard, but there are those little pockets that make it so worth it.
Yes, and even like a good point that we didn't touch upon, I don't think, was even if you don't see them right away, that doesn't mean they're not there.
Yeah.
Right? And that's a thing that I learned, and that Kat sounds like you learned as well. With trying to kill ourselves, is that we would have missed out on so many cool opportunities.
Yeah.
And but when you're in that mindset, you don't think about it, right? Like, it's just the end all be all. Like it's just this is the way out. That's it, right? You're not thinking about what's going to happen in 5 years. You're not even thinking past tomorrow.
Yeah.
And I get that. So listeners, trust me, I understand what it's like to be in that dark place and nothing matters but you killing yourself. I understand. But trust me when I say I am a much better person now because I didn't do it. And I got to live things that I wouldn't have even experienced if I had done what I did.
Exactly.
I wouldn't be sitting here right now talking to Kat on this podcast.
Yeah.
Right? So, I don't know. That's just my 2 cents worth.
Yeah. And like, I just like even remember back coming out of a depressive episode and just little things like I love snow and I love the smell of spring, like when the snow starts to melt. And those just little things of like that peace, it reminds you like why this is worth it, like those little moments.
Yeah.
And like I try to remind myself that, you know, I struggled, but I'm still here, I'm alive. I'm able to experience these things still.
Yeah. And thank goodness that you are.
Thank goodness that we're both here.
Well, on that beautiful note. All right. Well, Kat, it's been wonderful having you on the podcast. Thank you so much for being so vulnerable and open today with your story. Wow. I feel like I learned a lot more about you today. And I've been your friend for 10 plus years. And I hope the listeners enjoyed listening to your story, the dark and the good, because it's who all of you, it's what makes you.
Mhm.
And I just hope that people today, or people listening to this podcast, can take away from it and just know they're not alone, and you know everything that we said before. But thank you, Kat, so much for coming on. I really do appreciate it. Thank you for opening up about your story. It means a lot to me, and I'm sure it means a lot to the listeners as well. So thank you.
Thank you so much. And I love you, man. And I'm glad you're in my life.
I love you very much, and I'm also glad that you're in my life, and still in my life, because we live X amount of hours apart. I don't know how long the drive is, but it's a long drive and a 2-hour flight.
Yes.
But yes. Well, thank you guys so much for listening. If you feel like it, drop a review on Spotify or wherever you listen to the podcast. Give it a like, share it to your friends if they're looking for something a bit different to listen to. I always just like to say, drink some water, take a deep breath, center yourself. It'll be okay. Reach out to somebody. And for God's sakes, wear your mask, please. Get vaccinated when you can, I guess, wherever you live. And yeah, just thank you for supporting this podcast. It really means a lot to me. And spread the message of hope. Thank you very much, Kat, for being on again. I really appreciate it. Stay safe. Love you.
Love you. See you.
Bye.